Before I pull in what we were doing, I threatened to last time, having to do with ugly technology, what would be, in a sense, either a follow-up or tied to it was another definition of the neural city, the singular world of man, etc., and it gave several. They pointed out that the neural city is where the imaginary pursues the illusory, and then it, a little more specifically, it was listed as civilization, but we're still talking about the neural city specifically. It said civilization, the magical, or considered the neural city. The magical transformation, or the place of, the magical transformation of verbs into nouns, services into goods, actions into objects, and the intangible made to seem totally otherwise. This is tied to what I was going to point out about ugly technology, and tonight it even, someone else followed it in, a news item that said, "Don't drive on no ugly bridge," which I assume was a follow-up also that I pointed out. Anybody had any sense of the artistic, any sense of the artistic, in the full sense of the word, that if they had a brand new bridge, and no matter how much it costs and how many dignitaries showed up, if you look at it for the first time, you come around this great curve, or wherever it is, and you get a glimpse at that bridge, and it's ugly, is don't drive on it. I don't care how many bands they got there, and I don't care how many tax dollars were spent. If it's ugly, don't drive on it. Then, anyone who might have a less simplistic mind might consider that technology and bridges could also be something else. They could be like neural bridges. It could be like the kind of neural connections that go inside of that normally tie an ordinary man's thoughts together. And as long as I brought it up, let's start almost in reverse. The magical transformation that the mind does. Because, see, what we often do, or what's the most common, I didn't invent it and you didn't invent it, is what symbolism is to take something that is actually undeniably physically true. Is to say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And let's say that you've been around canines enough that you go, oh, that's true. And almost any animal that can be domesticated at all, has any kind of social hormonal arrangement, unless you get it early, and they used to call it imprinting, but unless you get it early and have some effect on it, once you get an old dog, more or less, you can't teach them anything. And so if you were attempting to be of an allegorical turn of mind, then we would start from a specific, like me talking about bridges, and then go, But it could also be not only actual physical bridges of concrete and steel. It could be the kind of bridges that neurally connect up a man's mind and turn it into some sort of network that passes for his mind, for his personality. But there's also a way to look at that as going backwards insofar as there's any reality to a binary world. And that is what civilization is doing. That is what the mind itself is doing, is transforming in a magical manner, it says, verbs into nouns, services into goods, actions into objects, and the intangible into the totally otherwise. I could take that, which I have in the past, and do it the other way around and not bat an eye. Say that the whole point of civilization is to turn objects into action, to turn services into, turn verbs into nouns. But there is a more specific way that has to do with ugly art, ugly technology. How about, assuming that we have no satirist in the crowd and we don't have anybody left here from that convention of, the society, the Pro Society for Saturday Night Live or whoever. There's not a parody, but consider that goes on constantly. I could go all the way from infomercials on TV late at night to any kind of general fundamentalist religion throughout the world. But how about the one that's been going on for years and years? That they are advertising a book about how, and it's normally called something like, there'll be a serious man, he may have credentials, or anyway, he's all dressed up, and it's a book on how to understand and manage your finances. And normally it's some little setup, which is just a version of religion and guilt, but it'll say, show somebody wringing their hands, maybe a bottle of open booze at a kitchen table. And it's obviously late at night, and it's saying, are your credit cards, is your credit card debt about to ruin your life? And it shows maybe the guy's wife with a kid in a suitcase leaving behind him. And it's, are you to the point that you may have to declare bankruptcy? Have you lost everything? They're selling a book. How to manage, how to understand, they normally throw that in, we'll get that in a minute maybe. How to understand and manage, they say finances or sometimes debt. And I'm just making this short because surely you know what I'm talking about. And they will weave such a web that it all sounds all right on the surface to a thinker, if you were just listening to one ear. Not the ordinary. The ordinary really sounds good, or these people wouldn't be paying it. It's how to, and it starts breaking down the chapters and tells you how to understand debt, how to define debt, how to examine your financial position, and then perhaps they show guys with real nice suits standing what appears to be banks or on Wall Street somewhere saying, this book could help any man or woman in America today to get some sort of basic understanding on how to take the whole concept of debt and one's income and in some way turn it into an operational, to empower them to have some operational control. All right, you got it. And it's only $29.95, sometimes in easy payments if you got a MasterCard. Now, since we're not satirists and we're not social critics, we'll bypass, we don't have to excuse it anymore. I just keep bringing it up. Here's the point. If a man could think, what is there to understand about debt? I mean, it's very simple. I mean, they break it down, though, and they weave the chapters, and they show you how thick the book is and how long the guy worked on it. All of this, and of course, if you're ordinary, all this would sound as though we're really picking on people, and I might do a few stage theatrics, at least voice-wise. But you start asking yourself, wait a minute, what kind of goddamn idiot cannot just stop for a second, and he looks down. The kind of people that's going to buy the book, people in debt, are not working off of clipping coupons and capital gains. They're working off as a salary. You can count on it. Either that or welfare check. Either way, they know every week exactly what they're getting. I mean, if they've got any kind of walking around sense, enough to get down to the shop. If they can find their way there, and you ask a man, how much do you make a week? He says, my actual gross salary is $154 a week. And I say, well, how much do you take home after all the withhold? I take home every week, it never varies, I take home $112.59. I have it memorized. And how long have you been doing this? Well, I hadn't had a raise now in several years, so over 100 weeks, I get this. What is there to understand? That's how much money you got. That's how much money you got coming in. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You got no other job, no, and you got no capital gains, you got no investments, no stocks, no bonds, certainly not. So that's what you got, right? And you got these credit cards, and now you're $32,000 in debt. Yes, and you don't know why. You now want this book to explain how to handle that. Well, at least you, as I said, I could pick religion. I could pick psychiatry. But this is just a great one because this is what would seem to be very physical, hardwired, material aspects of life. That we're not talking about morality, we're not talking about religion, we're not talking about social problems with a psychiatrist, we're talking about hard cash. But it's still the same thing. That they're having to treat, don't have to do anymore. You understand that from one view, you could say, Jesus, anybody buy that book, they don't need that book. They need brain surgery. They need to have a damn brain transplant, maybe from a pig. Somebody. You say, why is somebody going to be sitting there and they keep flashing the number and say, call now, and somebody's going to order a book telling them how to understand and manage your finances. What's it to understand? You look at how much you make and you don't spend any more. That is if you don't go in debt. Now, if you don't care, you're not going to buy the book anyway. But it's sound. You understand without me doing any more. You sit there and listen to it because it is part of the woof and weave of civilization itself. Now back to the news item. Do you understand what they've done? They have taken a verb and turned it into a noun. They now treat debt as though it is an object. Any of you who didn't follow my other setup, do you know how far removed that is from the idea of Satan, Lucifer, the evil one? I'll tell you how far removed, about as close as they can stand shoulder to shoulder. They're back to back. They just changed the name. They have taken human, I'll make it easy, if we jumped over to religion like morality, which is just again civilization urging people to do better, they have taken what would be a verb, an action, a service, and they have turned it, apparently, and it's intangible, and they have turned it into that which is totally otherwise, apparently. They have turned action, going in debt, to an object, that they now treat debt as though they come this close. Now, I don't mean that they're conscious enough that they go, well, let's don't go that far. They don't. It's just that's the way, it's the only thing that would work within the present network of life. The man will sit there, and it's either hawking a book or they even have public service announcements of all these, some form of government or one of the charities that have some kind of credit counseling service. They don't charge anything. And you go, and they look you right in the camera, and they say, that's public service. In other words, it's good for you. It's your mother talking to you. That is, mother civilization. She's saying, now you people out there that are in debt with those credit cards, credit can be a good thing, but when debt begins to take your life, you've got to take it back. Like, just change debt to Lucifer, the Satan, the horn one. But they're saying you have got to overcome debt. You've got to take your personal life out of debt's hands. Come down and we do the service free. They're treating debt as though it is actually a thing. It's just one step. They're personifying it. And there's nothing wrong, but notice that is what is required in civilization, is that kind of magical transformation that you take the normal actions of life, the normal verbs of life, and you have to turn them into personas. The great one, if you're not, this wasn't the punchline to this, but I guess the widest river running through that kind of network is death itself. You have to personify the process, which death is just part of the process of life. You just got this service going on, you have to turn it into goods. You got in debt by dealing in services. You got in debt through action. But now it's reached the point that you're about to lose everything. $32,000 in credit card debt. What will I do? Like it never crossed anybody's mind, like, I won't go in debt. It's too late for that. So now it's like, is debt pulling you down? Is debt? And again, they show the guy's wife looking horrified, and little kitties in each hand, two this time, not just one, and the suitcase under the arm, and going out the door, and it's saying, is debt about to ruin your life? It's just this far from you expect any minute. After she leaves and the guy picks up the bottle again, that suddenly behind the door comes somebody that looks like Lon Chaney or, Count Dracula. Except he has on this sign under his cape that says, Mr. Debt. Maybe he has little horns and he's standing behind the guy. You understand this sounds silly, but millions, if not billions of people that would see that would nod like, yeah, screw him. Well, what's life, what's debt done to me? Man would not be civilized. Man would not pursue what seems to be these singular activities that are his and his alone if civilization was not continually attempting to sell you something. And sometimes it appears to be a negative sale, such as, to use ordinary terminology, to make you feel guilty. Do better, which is, of course, the basis of it, but to in some way verbally continue to criticize, to condemn, and a little bit of exhort you on to do better, but because you're doing bad anyway. I know. If it was just on the basis of a process, some kind of continuing activity, I'm going to leave this mostly with you. I wanted to get to this part of it. Try and picture yourself, without me trying to even do it. How would it go about it if religion talked about the less progressive aspects of humanity as though it were not personified in some force, such as Satan, the devil, evil cosmic forces, negative vibrations, it's always something specific. If you go all the way from New Age occultists of 5,000 years ago or today, or to good fundamentalist Buddhists or Muslims or Baptists. And in the same way, the process of going in debt, which is the process of dying, because even the religious, without hearing what they say, every now and then they get carried away and point out, especially when they're trying to take up collection for the church anyway, they'll say, well, we came in the world with nothing, we go out with nothing. And if you wait for them to draw any kind of actual conclusion, wait, I assume you're not holding your breath. And so they have to treat the process of life, which is the process of going in debt here in the city, they have to treat it as though it's a thing. You have to be able to turn action into objects, or the mind, I'm going to be more technical, the mind wouldn't put up with that shit. That is, if you had a mind, you'd go, what? Which was sort of the dramatic joke that I threatened to make in the beginning, if you were listening, if we were here to pick on people, is to hear. Of course, the short fact, remember, is not a happy fact if it applies to you. And so any of you who may be 32 or 12 or $5,000 in credit card debt, maybe that's why I'm not getting much of a smiling reaction to this. But if you could think at all, let's just be straightforward about it. We're not talking about ordinary people. Just quite straightforward. If you're in debt, there's nowhere to look. I mean, unless you were kidnapped and they took you to a machine and made you run up $32,000 of debt on your credit card machine, or however those things work. Other than that, how'd you end up in debt? There's nothing to discuss. It's not to make you feel guilty. There's just nothing to say. It's a point blank wall. And just even momentarily, you could get an ordinary person, I guess, just real quick, Lee, to go, well, yeah, but hey, that ain't the point, is it? No. That you had to say, how did you end up in debt with your credit card? And do I have to go through this process? I could say to an ordinary person, every time you decide you wanted to buy something, you thought, no, I don't have the money, and plus I'm in debt. Did somebody jump out, like Lucifer, Satan, the debt fairy, not the debt troll, I guess? Did he leap up and stick an invisible gun to your head and said, all right, damn it, charge that? And you went, no, I don't want to. And it said, I got your children at home. I got one of my accomplices over there now with dynamite, and they're going to blow up your plumbing if you don't go ahead and charge that. And they'd go, well, no, because it's obvious from that view, which I shouldn't even say from that view. It's obvious. That's the way it happened. Nobody made you do it insofar as a persona somewhere. But what would you do with that? Because it'd be one step from there to what I guess is laughingly known throughout the last 6,000 or 7,000 years as it always comes back to the so-called argument between genetics and environment, between free will and predestination. You would have to, or stretched a little bit, as saying, can a man, or should we hold people, individual people, responsible for their actions totally? And that's what we're talking about now. And ordinary people said that. I didn't make up that term. It sounds great. You don't hear it a lot, but it's been said many times. And ordinary people say, well, listen, by God, we don't need people on welfare if you don't get into the government aspect. Now, so we don't need to be keeping all these prisoners and taking care of farmers that have some kind of potato blight hits them. Every man must be responsible. They knew the problem when they decided to be farmers. I didn't tell those people to be farmers. Why should I help bail them out? People should be responsible for themselves. That's a very old idea, but notice it is, you don't have a political party based on that. You don't have a religion based on that. You don't have any large social club based on that. It's the kind of thing you can hear it, and if you just got through paying your taxes, and you happen to hear that, you might go, yeah. If you just heard on the radio, you might go, yeah. And that's it. There is no demand for that currency, that everybody is responsible, or should be held responsible. That is one reason that people cannot see that, and it's not that it's right or wrong, but do what I was going to ask you to consider off on your own. If you tried to treat morality, which is just attempting to be more civilized on a sort of mechanical level, if you treated that, or if you treated being in debt on the basis that you are responsible, there is no personification, there is not even the hint, if this was what was coming out of the collector's attitude, that there's not even the hint of there being almost an old figure hiding behind everybody's door. A cape and an evil look, and he's Mr. Debt. This is no such thing. Every time you pulled out a charge card, every time you went in debt, you did it. If that were the basis of civilization, would man be civilized? Where would you go with that? If, I'm not saying that we should, but if that were it, instead of now there being public service announcements about, is debt about to run your life? Is debt going to keep you and your children, the next generation, locked into the cycle of welfare-based poverty and intractable debt? Is that going to ruin your life? What if it was this? That the public service, a person comes on, maybe a famous person or a kind-looking person, but a face comes on behind a desk and it says, if you're in debt, you did it. If you got more debts than you can pay, you did it. Why don't you stop? This has been a public service by your government. Worse yet, this has been a public service by your city. In my sense, this has been a public service of life. That's why I'm hinting at. You laugh. The point is, you know it's not going to happen. And more than that is what would life do with that? If that had been the basis of life, if life had taken some parallel universe, taken another course, and that was the encouragement that life seemed to offer man to evolve, was that you're responsible for everything you do, all the way from the way you treat people, whether you shoplift, whether you steal, whether you cheat on your taxes, whether you go in debt, whether you unfaithful to your wife. I don't care what it is, you're responsible. Now I'm just telling you that now. And maybe it doesn't even say anything. It doesn't say, now you're responsible and better watch it. If it just said you're responsible, not even a threat, what would happen? Where would we be? Well, other than not here, but I'm just trying to give you a hint. Where would we be? If the neural city of man did not continually turn, in a sense, I assume you're following now some of what I'm saying, turn actions into objects, turn verbs into nouns, chop up, God forgive me for using it, continuums. I think we've all been exposed to science fiction too long. Into unending sentences. If we did not cut them up, which is the same thing, by this magical transformation of a person going, wait a minute, I know why I'm in the position I'm in now, which we've already established from psychiatry and everything else. The answer is, sir, I can save you a lot of time. Are you alive? Yes, there's your answer. No. Hey, what kind of joke is that? No, see, that would be that answer. That no matter what you said, if you said, everybody applaud if you have any, or hold your hand if you have problems in life. And I said, well, we're going to just combine it real quickly. I have the resources here, and we've already prearranged it. We've got it programmed thanks to modern technology and electronics, that from a combination, the ultimate, the supreme, the paramount combination presently of economics, religion, philosophy, psychology, we have the answer, the immediate answer, no more extended lays on a psychiatrist's couch, no more going to school, no more having to go to these credit counselors, no more worrying about how much going. Just start holding your hands. We've got plenty of time. We'll hit everybody. Tell me what your problems are, and we'll give you the solution. And say, first off, who all has problems? So, the billions of people or hundreds, whoever, they all raise their hand. You say, all right, we're going to go around and get everybody individual, but I can tell you right now, all you who hold your hands, right quick before I get to you individual, how many of you are alive? Raise your hand back up. If they all do, say, there's your problem. Of course, they had any sense, we'd have then, almost 5 billion people go, my God. Of course, when they did that, went, my God, they'd probably have killed themselves with that blow, that and the information. And there'd just be me left there, and suddenly I'd hear very hard breathing, and there'd be local conditions. And boy, I don't even want to turn around because I can figure what's in store. You understand that if you did not cut up the process of being alive, if you did, which is what I meant by the magical transformation of verbs into nouns, services into good, actions into objects, and the making of the intangible into the totally otherwise, that debt has now become something and it's nothing. Well, it's intangible, it's a word, it's part of a process, but now debt is a noun. Whereas in a sense, until neurons, you have to dance on the edge of the world's finest razor blade, because as soon as you say it, it's already a bit of sold goods. But as soon as the mind says any word, then whatever it was has become a noun. It has been cut into, it has almost been separated from life itself, which is one of the purposes of the mind, of neurons, is to turn this, which is, from one sense, is too large to be comprehensible. How's that for an understatement? It's just, overwhelming. But if you cut it up small enough, chop up those little peas or those little carrots, and you can finally get in your little mouth. It's like talking to a little diner, a little thinker. It's like you have to cut up things, and once you cut it up, the process of going into debt no longer is a process. It is now personified. It has become a thing. The process of being alive and being an unfinished nervous system, an unfinished creature, the process of being unsatisfied about it, has become personified into whatever religion or whatever sense of morality, into a kind of personified object, guilt, sin. Somewhere, surely you see what I'm saying. It's the same thing as debt, that it has to become an object. Because if it's an object, it's like it can be dealt with. Oh, Mr. Debt. And of course a man can say, well, I know there's no old Mr. Debt behind my door, but by God, it's almost as though it's some kind of evil thing on my head. It just made me do it. I'm sure by now there's got to be in psychiatry a phobia or a name for the desire, the uncontrollable desire to go in debt. Some kind of mania, debtomania. It has to be treated in that manner, because you understand, if it were not treated in that manner, you couldn't even conceive of it, much less go into it. And you got to go in debt if you're alive. But if there was no beginning and no end to it, if it were a continuing action and it was not cut up into some object, there couldn't even be the illusion that, yes, says the counselor, the debt counselor, you come see us and together we can lick old Mr. Debt. If it was still on the basis that this was an action, what are you going to say? About the only thing you could say, which is not going to happen, but about the closest you could say, it would be comparable to them saying, come on into the church and we'll lick Satan. We'll lick the evil forces. We'll lick Mr. Debt. About the only thing they could say, if it was outside religious context, was they'd have to be saying, you're going to have to be responsible for what you do. That will not work on the ordinary individual. That will not work on 5 billion people in the collective herd of humanity, because they would all go into the debt doctor's office, the credit counseling service, and all 5 billion people say, we're in debt. We're in debt to the point that we don't know how to get out, and it's annoying. And he says, well, I've got the answer to all of them. You got to be responsible for yourself. And suddenly you got 5 billion people in your office, already hot and sweaty and milling around, and all 5 billion go, we drove all the way across town to hear this. Now, I came for help. I didn't come for this. That, in a sense, I guess we won't get into it, but was where I was trying to, or going to lead. It becomes a form of ugly technology. That's just from a peculiar view, you might say, because ordinary people, it's not ugly technology. It is a desirable, or a potentially desirable way out. They see it as the ordinary mind would not analyze it, of course, this way, but they see it as at least a potentially attractive bridge that may get me out of here. Come see the credit doctor. Come see a priest. Come do something in the city. Turn to us. That's what we're here for. That's what collective intelligence is here for. Why do you think there is a herd? And there was a news item tonight, if you notice, that pointed out that the herd does not mind if an individual cow complains, questions the kind of solutions and answers the herd gives. The herd doesn't mind as long as you keep turning to the herd for an answer. The herd don't mind, even if you got a religious herd. They don't mind atheists. They're challenged. Those who run the economy the kind of people sitting up in Rhode Island, the DuPonts, the Rothschilds, who are not in debt, certainly not on their credit card, they don't mind the rest of you going in debt. How's that for an understatement? I assume some of you know it. They love it. Who do you think is subsidizing? Who is the bankers? Life doesn't care. The Pope doesn't care if you got in front, I'm using all this, as you know, allegorically, and stick out your tongue at religion. Barclays doesn't care if you get in front of their bank and holler, you got me in debt and made me lose my home and my house. Made me have to go into bankruptcy. You can wave a little sign, don't deal with Barclays. Don't deal with the Rothschilds. Don't deal with the Rockefellers. That is, and of course you've got to get out of the way because everybody's going in and out of the bank. In fact, finally, if they ever happen to notice you, somebody at the bank will send out and say, did you actually have to go into the bankruptcy? And they say, yeah. And they say, well, how long has it been? You still got a job? And they say, well, come on in. By God, let's reestablish your credit. Do I take it you're beginning to catch on? That is, they'll let you go back in debt. But now, forget this idea about old banking conspiracies, although it's true. But now let's get into symbolism, not metaphor. Yeah, they will let you do it. But it's not the banking conspiracy. It's life. Life has got to continue to give you a chance. Well, life has an easy way when it's had enough of you. It doesn't make you go bankrupt. It doesn't make you start suffering from what you consider to be perhaps terminal guilt or some terminal form of depression. No, that's not. When life gets tired of you, it's boom. Well, that's it. That's why we have funeral parlors, caskets. Somebody to haul you away so you don't stink up the house. Everybody does it to one another. Why? As I said, the religious people even, all their vademecums all over the world, they say it, they repeat it, but well, into the world we come with naught, and with naught we leave. Everybody, yeah. You can remember that by as long as you can, dancing on the edge of a razor blade. Because it doesn't tell you anything. Contrary, if that were the prevailing sentiment, as I said, we wouldn't have banks. We would have no civilization. So it has to be cut up, and actions have to be turned into almost, literally, I keep saying almost to give you some way to fool with it, Mr. Debt. Satan. It becomes, from the ordinary view, like even having credit would seem to be, in a sense, attractive technology, which is the only reason people use it, right? People don't use it. You'll never stand in line somewhere and someone whip out a credit card and say, do you take MasterCard? And they say, yeah. And you go, well, I'll never trade here again because I can't stand that. It was just a test. And turn around and leave. Or they suddenly look and say, wait a minute. Those signs say, did you take credit cards? And they say, yeah. And you say, well, I wouldn't trade here. To me, that's just, I look at the whole concept of credit, and to me, I hate to say it, but it's past inelegant. It's downright ugly. It's despicable. They'd probably begin to call security. And because even you people would begin to wonder, what the hell is that? It is ugly from one view, if you're trying to think. And, of course, now, strike, of course, that we're not talking about actual debt. What we're talking about is the kind of debt of taking what everyone else thinks and accepting it or rejecting it. It doesn't matter, that you're playing with their currency, that you're outside Barclays, you're outside Chase Manhattan, you're outside the credit doctor. And you can be hollering, I want more credit, or you can be hollering, to hell with credit. That doesn't matter. As I said, they'll finally send somebody out and pat you on the back and say, so you had to go bankrupt. Well, I said, come on upstairs and have a cup of coffee. That's not the end of the lie. And first thing you know, they've given you a new card. You all followed that. That's life. Life doesn't care. Life is not going to get mad. As I said, if it gets mad, you'll know it. If life thinks, by God, you've pushed me around enough. You've cheated on me enough. I've let you run up debts with me, and by God, you never paid. When life feels that way, don't worry. You don't have to sweat and go out your mailbox every day waiting to get that final notice. Life lets you know. But from a thinker's view now, and we're not talking about debt or religious morality, ugly technology would be that which is inelegant. It would be that which relieves you of any responsibility of thinking. Not the idea, back to the literal, of saying that the only alternative to going in debt or the only alternative to accepting help from others, which of course doesn't help, but you have to accept it. You know, psychiatrists can't help, ministers can't help, the credit doctor can't help, but everybody pretends they can. They have to. That is why, from one view, it is ugly. Because if you take it from somebody else, in its ordinary view, now you can accept help. Somebody help you change a flat tire, somebody get a doctor to set your bone, a broken leg, rather than you try to do it. But when it gets outside the physical level, outside the material level, once you can think in a certain way, to take anybody else's ideas, if I pushed it by saying ugly technology, at least, how about inelegant? It's music for the tone deaf. It's rhythm, it's dance for the non-rhythmical. It is art for the blind. There were news items tonight that I was going to tie into it. Maybe we will, but that becomes ugly technology. It's having help. There was the other definition of civilization here, the neural city. It is the imaginary pursuing the illusory. And that's not just to make jokes at civilization, saying, well, trying to be rich or trying to get ahead in life is just a dream. Boy, is that a crackling good insight. I mean, that's enough to take your breath away. For a man 7,000 years ago, and there's some kid right now drinking coffee in the snack bar on many campuses throughout the world. Suddenly, and they're discussing politics and the older generation and everybody, and suddenly somebody says, you know what? This whole thing, ordinary middle class, bourgeois, life in the city is nothing but a dream. It's an illusion. And they go, I always knew Buford had it in him. The man's a philosopher, so he'd just change his name to something a little more continental. Francois instead of Buford. The point is saying that life's a dream. I wasn't trying to take credit for one of the older plagiarized terms, because that had to be the second or third sentence after Adam and Eve in the garden. You know, I've already given you the first one or two, but shortly after that came along and one of them went, you know, I think this whole thing is some kind of bad dream. And of course now you've had 6,000 or 7,000 years of men keep punching each other and saying, isn't it, isn't it, isn't it? It could be, could be. Like we'll snap out of it any minute. But it is, in one sense, from not an ordinary view, because it's not a criticism, it's an observation of a point-blank wall. It is the obvious that is itself elegant once you can stand and look at it. Once you can see it and it doesn't bother you, it is civilized life, which is simply the neural life of man. All of the singular intellectual activities, oftentimes including what people call the spiritual, the artistic, the aesthetic, the moralistic, but it's all the intellectual life of man. It is, in one real sense, the imaginary pursuing the illusory. You understand? It has to be. Because if you could catch up, you'd be like a dinosaur. Whatever you caught, you would have killed. You would have tried to, grab a hummingbird. You can't grab such as that. You cannot grab life itself without crushing it. You cannot grab a process until you turn it into what apparently is an object. Until you have segmented it, until it has become something that the mind can deal with. But then from one view, and it can be then great technology, because the more words men have, the more that they do cut up life into discrete objects, then the more we seem to, the more we do advance at that level. And so technology continues to bloom and to flourish. But in one sense, once you get past the point of we've gone from old 78 vinyl records and 33s into the world of CDs, once you get past that and you take it from the material world into the intellectual world, there is such a thing as ugly technology. And if your technology came from somebody else, it is inelegant. It is ugly. You shouldn't drive on it. Not that you're necessarily dangerous, like the bridge that might be ugly, but it's going to take you nowhere. That doesn't qualify as an ugly bridge. Even if it doesn't fall down, you drive over it, and every time you drive over it, to the other side, wherever you're going intellectually, and you get there, and you think, Jesus, this is like where I left, the other side. Well, I'll try that next bridge. Or I'll go back over this one and come back. Maybe somewhere in the middle of the bridge I ran into the twilight zone. If you finally understood that this bridge I keep traveling, or bridges, gets you nowhere, that wouldn't finally qualify as ugly?